Welcome to On Subrogation. On this episode, we are going to be talking about large language models, AI, like ChatGPT, and how they will affect the legal industry and specifically the subrogation industry. I'm Rebecca Wright. The first question we have to deal with is, what is ChatGPT and what are these large language models? Well, specifically, these models were created to try to mimic human speech. They were trained on billions of web pages and articles and other examples of human speech to try to be able to predict how to give data that sounds like a human is actually talking. And that is why we sometimes have issues with these models not giving us quite the right answer. Because of course, they're not a search engine. What they are is a predictive text generator. When you go to use a tool like ChatGPT specifically, the very first thing you get is a warning, because of course the program also knows that it has these shortcomings. So one of the very things that it warns you about before you can even get started using it is to check your facts. It wants to make sure that you, the human, are double checking the information that it's spitting out. And that's because ChatGPT is going to give you information that is going to sound confident. It's going to sound like it's correct. But in fact, all it's doing is predicting text based on the huge amount of data that has been fed into the model. There was an attorney in New York State who learned this the hard way when he used ChatGPT to draft a motion that he then filed in federal court. When his opposing counsel went to look up his case citations in that motion, counsel found, or rather didn't find, any of those citations. Counsel looked into it further and discovered that none of the citations or quotations that this attorney had used could be found anywhere in the legal record. That's a big problem. When the court called this attorney on it, the attorney admitted that he had used ChatGPT in order to draft the motion and had not double-checked the sources. He actually had looked for a few of them and had determined that he couldn't locate any of them, but assumed that the chatbot somehow had access to other cases that he didn't have access to. And that simply wasn't the case. What happened was the chatbot simply made up language that sounded like it came from a case and sounded like it could be a citation. That attorney failed to double check the facts. He failed to recognize that ChatGPT and its ilk are not in and of themselves search engines. What they are is predictive text generators. The other thing that ChatGPT will warn you about when you first log into it is to beware of sharing private information. And this is a very important thing. Even though it could feel when you are working with a chatbot like ChatGPT, like you're only working specifically with this bot, that's not the case. Because of course the programmers and things are going to use the information that has been fed into the bot to continue to refine it and to continue to, well, make it better. But that means that if you feed in any personal identifying information about you or your insured or anybody else, that is now out there. It's part of the information on which the chatbot was trained. And therefore, that bot could spit that information out at any time in the future. So it's important to remember that when you're using these models, you should not be putting any sensitive or secure information into the bot. Another thing to be careful about with these types of language models is bias. Like I mentioned before, these models were trained on millions of web pages and web entries and articles and things. And while the programmers have done their best to try to put guardrails on this technology, the fact of the matter is that it is going to be affected by any bias that is present in the language that was fed into it. Researchers at MIT found that these biases do come out in the output from these chatbots and from these language models. So, for example, when it comes to professions, these bots like ChatGPT feel that flight attendant is feminine while lawyer is masculine. And of course, I take offense to that. So what are these language models good for if they are not good for drafting your legal motions from scratch or for use as a search engine? Well, they're already being used to make a lot of our interactions on the internet better. So, for example, insurance companies are now using these language models to improve their own chatbots. So, hopefully, soon, the days of those frustrating interactions with online chatbots will be gone as these new AI generated chatbots can have complex conversations with policyholders, being able to do things like not just look up specific information based on keywords, but also being able to interact in a natural language kind of way. We've also seen this in the legal context in terms of the way that we look up, for example, real case law. In online search engines like Westlaw and LexisNexis, it used to be that we had to use Boolean search terms in order to find the information that we were looking for. Nowadays, primarily you use natural search terms. Essentially, you plug in a phrase that you would like it to look for, and it is able to convert that natural language into an appropriate search. And in fact, LexisNexis is developing some additional tools using these chatbots to try to make them capable of drafting real legal motions and legal briefs based on actual case law. We're not there yet, but that kind of thing is coming. In the subrogation context, we have seen developers working on models that will comb through thousands and thousands of claims to try to identify subrogation potential without a human being having to do that individually, eliminating much of the manual labor, at least as a first pass, to reduce the number of claims that a manual subrogation specialist would need to go through to determine if they were appropriate for subrogation efforts. I encourage you to log on and try out one of these chatbots, but just remember that it is not confidential. It is not necessarily going to give you absolute facts, but it is really good at generating language. What it can't do yet is draft a legal brief for you, but that may be coming on the horizon. Until then, it's a great way to get rid of your writer's block. Just make sure to check the facts. If you would like more information about this or any other topic, or you'd like to refer a file, please contact us at info@rathbonegroup.com. Until then, I'm Rebecca Wright for On Subrogation, and that's the long and short of it.